welcome to For the Quantum Grammar Shoot 147. That's right, 147 of these podcasts. The only podcast of its kind on the interwebs that I'm aware of. I'm your host, Jason-Matthew Glass, full stop, and in this podcast I will be discussing various topics as viewed through the lens of correct sentence structure, communication, parsing, syntax, grammar, i.e. quantum grammar. The awesome technology brought to the public in 1988 by David-WYNN, Miller. In this particular edition, I'm going to give my best attempt at talking about the holidays. So yeah, this could be considered a holiday edition. And I'm going to talk about the whole psychology behind Christmas. Actually, more specifically, the whole ideology behind Santa Claus, not to mention the other mythical character, Jesus Christ. But first of all, let's talk about Santa Claus and the whole psychology behind that concept. A few people will say, Santa Claus, I mean, what harm is it in getting a child to believe in the myth or the story or the magic of Santa Claus? What harm is it? I mean, you tell them a story about this magical red and white garbed obese old man in a sleigh being flown across the earth with magical flying reindeer. And he lands on your roof, or if he can't land on your roof, lands outside, comes down your chimney, can't do that. He somehow or another gets into your house. Right? And leaves you stuff. Normally when people come into your house unannounced, uninvited, unexpectedly, they don't leave things for you, they take things from you. Well, that's why you got to leave milk and cookies or whatever it is for Santa Claus, because he's got to sustain his worldwide trip to children all over the world. Because he can see you when you're sleeping, and he knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So you better be good, for goodness sake. That's kind of creepy, folks. Now that you think about it. Well, now that I think about it, and I have thought about it many, many, many times since I was a child. What harm is it in getting a child to believe that lie? Because it is a lie. And folks say, well, there's different degrees of lies. Well, true. I mean, just like there's different degrees of assault. You can punch somebody and break their nose, and that's like a minimum thing. Or you can beat someone so that they're in critical condition and in the hospital, or someone can just stop breathing from a beating. So yeah, I guess in the sense that there are different degrees of lies, sure. Different degrees of damage done. However, it's still a lie. Just like an assault, a physical assault is still a physical assault if it creates damage of some sort. I don't think any of that's good. Do you? That's the term that came up with white lie. You can get them to believe in Santa Claus because it makes them so happy. Makes them so happy to believe in this lie. I just, personally, as a child, I did buy into that for a little bit. And then one night, I stayed up. I used to have a little ritual I did. Or, I don't know if you want to call it, yeah, I guess you call it ritual. Where I would read the child's version of Count of Monte Cristo every Christmas Eve. I would also read the Lord of the Rings, the entire Lord of the Rings in December. As a child, I used to do these things. And one night I stayed up looking for Santa Claus. Now, for Christmas, I did, as a child, I have to admit, I was blessed to live in a very cool place as far as Christmas goes, because this is back when we always had snow for Christmas. Always. There was always at least, half a foot of snow or so. And where I lived, it was out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Pennsylvania big woods. No leaves on the trees, so you could see the small, I guess what you would call them, hills. They're not quite mountains, because they're not big enough to be mountains, I don't think, but they're pretty big. So big hills. And on the hill adjacent from my house was a railroad track. And usually at 3 a.m. or so, you would see a train make its way across the hillside. And it was so cool. It was great, with the steam coming out of the chimney on the car, the front car. And then they would have the caboose, the light in the caboose. But I can tell you one thing I never saw on that Christmas Eve was Santa Claus. And so it was then I realized it was all a sham. And then I started wondering, what else did they lie about? The parents, what else did they lie about? If they're willing to go into that much of an elaborate scenario for this, what else are they willing to buy into? So I ask you, again, what harm is it in getting someone to believe in a lie that makes them happy? That's kind of a tricky question, isn't it? So let's move on to the Jesus Christ portion of the podcast. And there are a lot of parallels between Jesus and Santa, if you really look at it. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Santa Claus is omnipotent. Okay? He is. If he can see you while you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows if you've been bad or good. If he knows all that, he's basically omnipotent. He has been imbued with omnipotent powers. Much like Jesus. Jesus is always with you. Jesus is coming. Let Jesus come inside you. Inside your heart, whatever it is. I had to say that real quick because I realized what some people might be thinking by my words. And I got to admit, I was kind of going that way just to be cheeky. But really, though, it's the same thing. Maybe, well, there's a St. Nicholas. Well, there's a Jesus. Okay. Really? How much historical proof is there for this Jesus? And if Jesus Christ actually existed as that, or by some other name, like Santa Claus existed by some other name, Kris Kringle, whatever other name they give him. Same thing with Jesus, Yehoshua, or whatever else people call him. If he actually indeed really existed, did he really do those things? Could he really walk on water? Could he really turn water into wine? And why would he do that? Why would he rather serve people alcohol than fresh, sparkling water? Interesting, Turning, whatever miracle you want to put your finger on. Bringing people back from the dead, which, there's a whole mess of other things I could go into here. The Immaculate Conception. And all these things that your parents are supposed to believe, or did believe, or do believe, or maybe you even believe them. It's the same thing as Santa Claus. You have to go on faith. You just have to believe. Haven't you ever watched the Polar Express? For Odin's sake? The Christmas spirit? You don't believe that can really happen? That a choo-choo train can come right outside your house, on your street, when there's no train tracks, and suddenly there's train tracks, and Tom Hanks can kidnap a bunch of children in the middle of the night with no one knowing? Ooh, did I say that? All right, let's stop that train of thought right there. Woo woo! Anyways, back to what I was talking about. Religion, Jesus, Santa Claus. Point being, what is the harm in believing in a lie? Something... All right, let's soften this a little bit, folks. What harm is there in believing in something you cannot prove, you cannot certify? And, I'm sure there's going to be people being, well, I know in my heart there's a Jesus.
Oh, well, I know in my heart there's a Santa Claus.
That's kind of immature type of reasoning, isn't it? Then people say, well, how can you explain that when I gave my life up to God, things changed for me? When I gave up control I had and put it in God's hands, things suddenly went better for me. When I stopped trying to control everything and do this and that. Well, okay. Saying that you put it in God's hands, to me, is just a way to stop thinking. You can attribute it to God if that's what makes you happy, if you want to believe in something you can't certify. But let's go a little deeper with that. Once you relinquish the concept of control, which contra is a particle of negation, so control literally means no contract. Once you relinquish that, you get rid of that, and you just flow, you go with the flow like water, and you can sort of steer what you're doing, but you kind of use the cosmos, your surroundings, the sea of space, your environment, to kind of guide you. It's the same thing. You don't have to use the word God. I put it in the hands of God. No, I put it in the hands of the cosmos, in the hands of the life force, whatever it is. Okay, I'm going to put it in the first person. I don't have to know how life began. I certainly don't have to know how life ends. That's a great mystery, of course. I don't have to know. I don't need closure on if there's a creator or not a creator of this environment, this life I am perceiving right now. I don't have to know that. It's not a big deal to me. I'm more concerned with the day-to-day and getting through that. It doesn't make me feel any better or worse to believe in a lie or to believe in a thing that I cannot prove. For some people, I guess it may make them feel better. And so this answer to this question that I posed at the beginning of the podcast, what harm is it in believing in a lie? That's up to each individual and how you want to navigate yourself. But I will say this, if you still believe in Santa Claus, or if you believe in Jesus Christ, or invisible man in the sky, then you, friends and neighbors, you are going to have a whole heap of difficulty getting closure on correct sentence structure, communication, parsing, syntax, grammar. Because this grammar technology is about facts that you can prove. You have to be able to prove, let's put it that way. You have to provide a continuance of the evidence. And these are just things that you can't do with these concepts. There's just really no way of doing it. I've never seen it done. And if someone out there can do it, do it. But I've challenged the biggest and the best out there on this, and no one can do it. It all comes down to them actually saying to me, well, for me, this is a fact. I can't prove it to you then. Okay, cool. Guess we're not going to be contracting on that then. Yeah. That's how it goes. So what harm is it? I can honestly say that, I used another one of those pre-qualifiers. Folks, stop and correct. If someone says, I can honestly say, you know, and I just said it myself, so I'm talking to myself here as well. If someone says, I can honestly say, blah, 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 then what does that mean for the rest of what they say? They're not being honest? It's kind of like you go to the health food section in a store. It's like, oh, this is where the healthy food is. But what does it make the rest of the food in the store? Right? So apologies for that. I can say that as far as my own children go, I did do the Santa Claus thing for a little bit, but I was never, like they watched the Christmas shows, and I mean, folks, really, is there any activity out there that can beat sitting down with, in a Christmas environment and watching Christmas shows, classic Christmas shows with your children? How cool is that, right? It's a pretty cool thing to do. The caveat to that for me is that I never, ever said that Santa Claus was real, that I can remember. If they asked me, I said, well, that's up to you, whether you decide what you want to do with that whole idea. That's basically what I said. And of course, I got a whole heap of backlash from what we would call the other side of the family about that. The same type of backlash I got when I said, no, they're not going to get baptized. None of that BS. If you want to give them a bath, I'll throw some water on them if you want, but I'm not going to be bringing them into that house to have that guy in that little dress do that to them. F that. So a lot of static there. This was many years ago. But I did things a little differently. And that's just how I feel about it. But again, it's up to everyone out there how they perceive this, how they want to move through their life. Do they want to participate with assumption, presumption? Do they want to believe in something they can't prove based on what they know in their heart? Actually, when someone says to me, I know this in my heart, blah, 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 that just tells me, oh, that's what they really want to believe, so therefore they just strongly go in that bias. You go with that bias, that direction. They don't know it, but that's just what they want to believe. And that's up to them. There's still no proof of it, right? When I make decisions, when I make choices, I try really hard to have all the facts on the table before I do that. And of course, there are times when you do have to make assumptions and presumptions in split-second decisions, and you have to live with those. But by and large, and in bringing this back to the grammar, you have to be able to certify your facts. You have to be able to prove them with the continuance of the evidence, the same way you can prove a cup is a cup, a car is a car, a tree is a tree, a refrigerator is a refrigerator, what else? A document is a document, a brick is a brick, grass is grass, the sky is the sky, the moon is the moon. What you know of the moon anyways. But then when we start talking about things we can't see, well, we can't see a cell, can we? Oh, well, we have this tool called a microscope. Okay, so now we can see cells, so they do exist. Because we're magnifying them. Okay. But you still can't do that with God or Santa Claus. You still can't do it. So, Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Salam Aleikum. Sincerely, from my heart, to everyone out there, regardless of what you choose to believe or don't believe, I hope that only the best of things comes to you. The best in positivity and a joyous holiday season. And I hope you have a great 2025. Thank you.